please welcome my dear friend, Angela Todd.
We're the Highwaymen. We sing a story still untold. We carry the sons you can only hold. We are the daughters of the silent generations. You send our hearts to die alone and fall.
Hi, everybody. I'm so excited to be a Born to Rise. But I have a slideshow, so I'm not going to stay in the tent because you either get to see me up there or you get to see my cool slides. So that was your moment to see me. I am so excited to be a Born to Rise. Yay, Kim! And thank you, Brendan, for being my human clicker tonight. Click. Who here knows some cool women? This is how I start all my talks, but I know the answer tonight. Click. I'm Angela Todd, and I'm an archivist and a historian and an activist. Click. Sorry. And I'm here to tell you some stories still untold. I specialize in women's history, and tonight you're going to hear about Elmira and Anna and May. Click. I worked at a botanical archive at a top university for 18 years. Click. And that's where I learned who collects and donates their archives, all the evidence of everything that they've achieved in their lives. Well, Ron did, and so did Art and Bill and Walter. Click. So Walter's collection had all the evidence to back up his resume, or CV. His dissertation, all his explorations, his fancy job employed by the War Board during World War II to go find a plant that we could make rubber tires out of. Click. Thank you, Brendan. As Henry Louis Gates says, though, intimate stories bring our pasts to life. Click. And as I became more intimate with Walter's collection, I learned so much about his wife. She sorted all the seeds and labeled them and put them in envelopes. She made sure the plant presses were in alphabetical order. And she, as you see in this picture, typed his dissertation for him on the floor in Dominica in 1937 with no running water. Click. So I probably don't really have to convince anyone in this crowd that there's a gap in history. Click. And there is a hashtag you can follow that says this: women's history is American history. And I really want to push us to think better than that. Click. American history needs women's history. They're not separate. World history needs women's history in order to be complete. Click. So let me tell you about these three ordinary women. Click. Elmira was born in January of 1925 in Mississippi. She had 10 children. She told us, her daughter set us up in an oral history. That's part of the work that I do. And she told us that she started working at the family farm at the age of 7. She tended the chickens and the goats and the crops, and she did some plowing. She knew hard work. Click. Her mother, Lizzie Harper, died when Elmira was 11, and she was in the hospital with her when she died, 11 years old, with her mom, taking her last breath. And after her mom passed, her dad asked his mom to move in and help him take care of the family, Clara Talley. She was born in 1862 in Mississippi. Click. So starting in 1867, believe it or not, Black people in Mississippi were allowed to vote. After the Emancipation Proclamation, in Mississippi, Black folks were folded right into democracy. They were granted the right to a free public education. They were granted the right to vote. In 1869, Black men were allowed to run for office. And indeed, a black and tan party was a political party to try to rival the Republicans and Democrats. They had a progressive agenda and worked hard. It was a mixed race party. They worked hard to get black folks on the ballots and in the offices. But by 1876, white groups toting guns had gone to visit each of these black elected officials and gotten them to resign or finagled an impeachment. And the Black and Tan Party stuck around till about the 1920s, but they didn't have a lot of power. But Clara Talley, Elmira's grandmother, lived through that. And then she went and lived with Elmira. Click. Oral history, one historian says, redirects our gaze to things that have been overlooked. Click. And in our oral history, Elmira told us how much she loved school. She looked forward every year to the annual spelling bee and always finished near the top. She went to the little country school till about 6th grade, and then, click, she went to the town school, the Rosenwald School. And in preparation for this presentation, I looked for a picture of it. What the heck? And much to my surprise and the surprise of Elmira's kids, the Rosenwald School that she went to was part of a big project backed by Julius Rosenwald, one of the guys behind Sears and Roebuck, and Booker T. Washington, the man that did the peanut experiments at the Tuskegee Institute, a black scientist. So they got together and built a slew of small schools. They all had the same plan, 2 rooms for rural black kids to get a chance to come along. Click. By 1932, they had built over 5,300 of these schools, only in the South. Click. Elmira spent her life in community. She was recruited to teach. She didn't apply for that job. They wanted her. She wrote for the newspaper, and she represented her black church at the regional and state, mostly white, activities. And she volunteered again and again as a poll worker, witnessing many first-time votes and in making sure that her community was able to vote. All 10 of her children went to college. Extraordinary, don't you think? Click. Research is creating new knowledge. Click. And I think there are a lot of potential research stories in Elmira's life. She had a tie to her history, she had a good schooling option, and she loved it. She had a community around her. Mysteriously, her dad's grocery store was burned down. The community's black church was burned down. But she held up her head and she kept going. Click. And she loved to have hats on that head. In fact, when I asked for some shots for this presentation, I wanted, her with the 10 kids or whatever. And her youngest daughter, who I was working with, said, well, Mom liked to, be done and have a hat on and be posed. We don't have a lot of, crazy photos or anything, and I don't know if she'd want me passing them around. And then when Elmira passed away, click, all of her daughters and granddaughters wore her hats to the celebration of her life. It's beautiful. Click. But hats weren't her only legacy, not by a long shot. Click. Elmira left an extraordinary legacy of leadership, justice, and family. Click. Oh. Including my dear friend, Dr. Reverend Terrell Curry Avery. She's the youngest of those 10 kids. This is Terrell Ann and her daughter Ruby at the protest that she told you about earlier this evening. That's Elmira's baby. Yeah. Thank you, Terrell Ann, for letting me tell her story. And thank you all for listening. Click. Next, we have Anna. She was born in 1890 in Russia. She had 4 boy children that all passed and 4 girls that all lived. Click. She was sent for. And her husband, when she got here, her husband married her, and then he went off and worked in upstate New York at an adult Jewish camp where they worked to try to keep Judaism alive in the face of assimilation. And Anna kept the home fires burning in New York City, raising those 4 girls. She, I think I lost my place a little bit. Oh, she, click, there. She was waitressing in New York City, and we have a lot of the details about her early time in New York City. One of her daughters wrote, when the daughter was 80, just some paragraphs about what she remembered that her mom had told her about hiding from the pogroms in Russia before she had come to America, and about coming and starting a life here. Click. The rock of their collection, though, is the 6,000 family photos. And Elmira is in the upper left-hand corner. That was her immigration photo that you saw in the first 2 slides of her. That was 1911. Click. And the 4 daughters, as you can see, they stayed very close. They went to high school together. They got boyfriends together. Click. They got married and had children. Click. And the sampling of these photos that I've collected here shows 100 years of Jewish women's history, of family history, of photographic history, the rise of the housewife. Those 4 daughters became dream housewives. And they also offered new information about the upper blue arrow there is a photo from a Jewish girls' athletic camp that the girls went to in the summer. And the lower arrow is a photo of kind of a Catskills Junior. So they went in the summertime to this cottage of this colony of cottages. They had about 8 cottages and a hand-dug swimming hole, and I don't think they had comedians every night. But it's a whole new level of information that is begging for a research project. Click. So I've worked with Anna's great-grandchildren to find a permanent home for their photos. An archive for Jewish family history in New York City is the perfect place to keep the photos, the autobiographies, and they have video of the 4 daughters singing in Yiddish to their grandchildren. And of course, it will save Anna's extraordinary story. Click. And this is May. This is my last lady. She was born in 1944 in northern Maine. She had 2 living children and lost a baby, and then recently lost an adult child. Click. She was the baby of the family. I don't know if you can see, there's a little blue arrow pointing to her. And so she was last in line for the clothes. You can see in the picture on the right. Click. May's dad fought in World War I for the Canadians. So when he married her mother and became a U.S. citizen, he lost his chance at a pension. Click. In northern Maine, the schools go back in July. And then when the potatoes are ready to be harvested, the schools close, businesses close, everybody harvests until the potatoes are all picked. And so these kids probably were saving up potato money for their new school clothes. But May and her siblings donated their potato money to the family budget. And it still seemed like a step up because her mother had said she had not been allowed to go to school after 4th grade because she was needed to scrounge for firewood for the house. And her mother had told, May's mother had told her, I will never let you kids go hungry or cold. And she did, but they still were not up out of poverty yet. Click. May was the prettiest girl at the prom. She couldn't wait to graduate and move to Boston with her girlfriends and share an apartment. She wanted to be a telephone operator. But 2 weeks after the prom, she wrote to her ex-boyfriend and told him that she was pregnant. There was no discussion. There wasn't, what are we going to do? What are our options? There was no choice about anything. He called her on the phone and said, "You better be good to me." Click, click. After her divorce, she kept her self-respect by moving through a stream of pink-collar jobs, one after the other, through the 80s. Miraculously, she did purchase her own home. She fought off one lecherous boss after another, and that home still remains the family center after 40 years. She's independent, and she loves it. Click. She was the prettiest girl at the prom. Oh, I said that. I might be a little nervous because May is my mom, and she's the reason that I do the work that I do, because I feel so strongly that all our moms are sacrificing one thing and another and another. And I, as a mom, feel like it's tough, baby, it's tough. So she threw off all those leches. She bought her home, and it just seems miraculous to me. She's living her dream. And all of her dreams have been extraordinary. Click. And I think these women, a black sharecropper's daughter, a Jewish immigrant, and a very poor rural white woman, clearly show us the gaps in history. The three ordinary women who have all done extraordinary things. And I would venture to say that, well, judging by this crowd, there are no ordinary women. Click. So we may be the daughters of the silent generation, but we were born to rise. Click. Another historian, I love this quote, says, "Gone is what happens when people stop asking. When all research has ceased, when no one contributes to the archives of a life or prevents its extinction." Click. So please don't leave it for the cleanup crew. Your story, your elders' stories. I have a friend here who's here with her beloved auntie. Your aunties and your moms and your grandmas and your sisters of choice and your blood sisters. And if you're not sure to where to start, you can text CHANGE to change history. Text CHANGE to 33777, and you'll get a guide tip sheet from me on how to start your archive or your mom's. Because in the end, I believe in my heart of hearts that we can change history. Thank you.
And we'll come back again.